Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Play Xenosaga Episode 3. I decided I was going to just load the same file up again, gives us our database update, and that's pretty much all this episode is going to entail since last time we ended the game and watched the awesome cutscenes. This time, let's see if we can explain why many of the things happened in those cutscenes, and pretty much throughout the entire series. More so applied to Episode 3, but there's a lot of information that just gets kind of glossed over, and we don't really learn a whole lot about particular characters. Case in point, Wilhelm. Now, most of the database entries post-game have been altered. Either they've added a couple of paragraphs, or in some cases they rewrite almost the entire entry. So I've actually gone through and written down where the important information is. So here, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to start with the 5th paragraph, which is rare because almost all of them start with the 4th paragraph for some reason. Regardless, he calls KOS Yeshua, which actually was KOS's original name back in the Lost Jerusalem era. That was what he was referred to as. He plots to change the very shape of the world. He's trying to bend the movement of the God-ordained compass toward his own desired conclusion. He makes himself a traitor unto God, which is kind of weird because, in a sense, I guess that's what he's doing, but more than that, he's trying to protect the world. And regardless of how he goes about it, it's a way that doesn't really coincide with pretty much all of our other characters, but he is trying to save the world. That's why he enacts eternal recurrence all the time, over and over and over again. Now, do note that he does not remember one occurrence to the next. So he has this ordained plot. This is what he, as an individual, as an entity, is supposed to do. Just like chaos is supposed to be the failsafe for the universe. And basically what the failsafe is, they don't really explain that very well, is that the failsafe, chaos, is there to basically cut off the lower plane. Now, the lower plane, as we've kind of talked about once or twice before, is separated into the real domain or realm or whatever you want to call it, and the imaginary realm. Imaginary realm, of course, is where the gnosis reside. That's the lower dimension. The higher dimension is where Udu lies and all the other higher dimensional beings that they basically never talk about in the case of this. Well, Mary Magdalene, Chaos, and Wilhelm all were basically sent down, and the physical representations that we see of them in the lower dimensional reality-based world are just, I guess, projections that flow through all the different things. It's somewhat of a confusing concept to grasp, but once you spend as much time researching this shit as I have, it starts to make sense, even if it doesn't make sense to somebody else. So I'm going to try my best to kind of bring this all information to you guys. Okay, what he is attempting to accomplish can be inferred from the words he once spoke to Kevin as a boy: eternal recurrence. The will of humanity resonated with Chaos's power of anima, the failsafe. The universe's destruction was ordained from that point. Basically, when Chaos uses his power, it's to save all universes, or the entire, all of creation, whatever you want to call it. Basically, what he does is he cuts the lower domain off from the higher domain, keeping the higher domain where he was originally from safe, but that ends the lower domain. Wilhelm is basically like a guardian, and yes, I could, spoonie it up and put like clips of different guardians and different media that are really evil, but no, that's not really what this video is for. But basically, he is the guardian that is, his role in everything is to protect the lower domain universe. So that's why he enacts eternal recurrence, because if it all cycles back to the start again and runs all the way through, do note that this is the start not of the creation of the higher dimension, but the lower dimension universe. Basically, the universe that we as human beings in a reality that's not a video game can understand. And what he's trying to do, he's trying to protect that universe. It cycles back to basically the Big Bang for that one, cycles all the way to the end, and then cycles back through again. But just because that's happening doesn't mean it's something that people who are aware of that would want to happen over and over again, which is why slowly over time it starts to change. In fact, nobody contains any memory of what happened in previous occurrences of the universe. Not Wilhelm, as far as I know, I don't remember it being said anywhere, neither does Chaos or Mary Magdalene. The only one that seems to have any knowledge of what happened before is Udu. Udu lives in the other realm. Now, he projects Abel and Abel's Ark into the reality-based lower domain and the imaginary-based lower domain universes, but I guess for some reason he just still maintains that. And so it's his manipulation, his communication through different people, Shion, Yuriev and such, that is what brings everything to a change in this particular instance of the recurrence. Remember, we have no idea how many times this has happened. And he does this through Zarathustra, Wilhelm does, and through Zarathustra, it's basically a mechanism that we talked about this during the ending cutscene, I believe, where he's added this purpose to Zarathustra, whose original purpose, or its original purpose, was to communicate to the higher dimension, to basically go and be with God. But he's added this purpose of cycling through to keep the lower domain alive, because they really don't know any better, and they're basically, was it Icarus? What was the one in Greek mythology, his wings melted because he tried to fly too close to the sun? Basically that type of a lesson. Okay, Vector, Ormus, and the Testaments, and finally KOS-MOS and Shion. He waited until the moment that all necessary factors were lined up. Since he's basically immortal, it doesn't really matter. From what I've been able to read, he didn't actually die, he just lost his physical body. It was one of the concepts that was floating around my head, but I wasn't sure, so I think I either mentioned it or I put a little annotation in there in the video when I was editing. Either way, it's unsure whether the current cycle is the 10th recurrence or even the 100th, as I've said, but basically, ultimately, mankind rejected his power, choosing to progress to the future by their own will, which is basically what we did. While his methods differed from Shion's, Wilhelm undoubtedly sought to save the world just the same, which is basically his purpose. It's one of the interesting parts about this game, and the series in general. There really aren't bad guys. There aren't just pure evil people. Now, I've said in the past that Albedo is pure evil, because he kind of is, but that's all been kind of brought along by his personal neuroses, psychological problems, being infected with Udu, and all this other things. Now, Udu isn't necessarily this evil thing. He doesn't infect people. It's his way of communicating. Because he's not an individual like everyone else, I guess when people communicate with him, all they see is what he shows them. And in this case, Udu decides to show, he sees the universe. He sees that it's going toward destruction. He shows them destruction. So anytime anyone communicates with Udu, Yuria, Voyager, whatever, they see that and they go, oh, and they get scared because, it's the destruction of the universe. That's very difficult to deal with. So that's just kind of some of the ideas that go into that. I've got like 2 full pages of notes here, and we've only gone into one of these. So let's move things along. Chaos! Most of this, from this point on, I think, showed up after we fought Kevin, I believe, but it wasn't all clear at the time. So he is the human incarnation of Anima, which, again, wasn't made clear until the final cutscenes there, and a power derived from the collective unconscious and present since the beginning of the universe. So he's always been here. His powers act as a failsafe for all dimensional space, specifically lower dimensional space, but whatever. There's a lot of contradiction between database, in-game, the Perfect Works, which is titled something else. There's like a Xenosaga 3 Perfect collection kind of thing that works very much like the Xenogears Perfect Works was for that game, and it tries to explain some of this stuff. There's so many different things going on, and the series creator was fighting with, was it Ubisoft or whoever produced this game? No, it wasn't Ubisoft. Whoever worked on it. I can't remember anymore. But, and so there's different creators at work here. There's different companies managing things. And so ideas get skewed and nothing ended up being exactly like the creator originally wanted it to be. Basically, or that also comes down to the fact that 3 games versus what they wanted to do was 6 games. Mary Magdalene, Animus, in the distant past, was basically his antithesis. Now, if you think about it, Mary Magdalene takes place in KOS-MOS. KOS-MOS is all in capital letters. Now, that's an anagram, so it's explained. Chaos's name is all in lower cases. Now, I've read that the reason for that was because they were supposed to be opposite ends of the same thing, which anima, animus, that makes sense. Chaos and KOS-MOS. Chaos and Mary Magdalene. So I guess that's the reasoning for that. I know I mentioned it in episode 1, so I figure I might as well at least give you the explanation at long last. Okay, he regained his former power through KOS-MOS's awakenings and left the possibility of a future in the hands of Abel, or Udu, and Udu chose to allow Abel to remain in the lower dimension. Chaos unleashed the power of anima, performing the dimensional shift with Nephilim. Okay, 4-year-old nephew, sorry. Nephilim was chosen by KOS-MOS and I guess Mary's will inside KOS-MOS to accept Mary's power. That's the only explanation I've seen made for why the power of Animus in the ending went to Nephilim instead of to KOS-MOS. So just someone wanted it that way. KOS-MOS, Mary, whatever. So that's the only explanation you get because that's all I got. He still exists, as we kind of saw in the ending there, as the universe's failsafe because they fate ordained by God, Udu, or perhaps because people struggling against their own fates desire his existence. Basically, Wilhelm's still alive in some way or another, Chaos is still alive in one way or another, and Mary's still alive in one way or the other. It's just not in physical form very much anymore. This one we want to start in the 4th, 3, and 4. A native of Mictum, he escaped by the hands of his fatally injured mother, we saw in the opening cutscene to the game, when the planet was destroyed as a result of the Zohar going out of control. Several years later, while working with Joachim, he completed the Nitho plans for KOS-MOS, and then he went to Vector. The surname Winnicott is from his foster parents who took him in after the escape of Mictum. It is unknown whether Kevin is his true given name or not. Regardless, it remains true that as a native of Mictum, the inheritor of the blood of Abraxas, his lineage is steeped in deep connection to the Zohar. So I guess that would make sense why he was so easily accepted into the great plans of Ormus, considering he was part of, the immigrant fleet or a descendant of, and so it would have made a lot of sense. It's also said that the only thing, I can't remember where this is, but the only thing he would say once he was rescued from Mictum was Kevin. So I'm not sure if that's his name, his father's name, his friend's name, or what, but Winnicott is the name of his foster family. Okay. This one, following the destruction, yeah, this is where it kind of explains that. I'm not going to go into great detail on this one, but yeah, he basically doesn't say much of anything, but his keen intelligence means he was adopted rather quickly because, hey, genius, he'll be able to pay for our retirement, especially if they didn't work for the government, as we've talked about in the database before. Original surname is unsure. The only thing he has is from the planet is his pendant given to him by his mother. He later opens up that pendant and inserts those petals we saw in the ending to signify his kind of new devotion away from his mother and more towards Shion. It also represents, their love affair and all this other stuff. KOS-MOS's archetype. In Jungian psychology, the archetype is the portion of the mind which is passed on hereditarily. It's said to be a model upon which the unconscious instinctive workings of the mind are structured. Now, the idea of Jungian's archetype and of the unconscious, specifically the collective unconscious, is present throughout all of Xenosaga and to an extent Xenogears as well, with Miang and her ability to pass on her intelligence and her knowledge and gaining new knowledge from each woman that she gets with, or not gets with, dirty mind again, infects, for lack of a better term, inhabits. Archetype was designed for the purpose of monitoring Shion, which we kind of learned about. It was later recovered after the incident and installed in the new KOS-MOS frame. Kevin, needing to die in front of Shion's eyes, had secretly installed a program into the archetype, causing it to go out of control. The program was later engaged via the startup key, which Kevin had given to Andrew Cherenkov. Now, if you recall back to episode 1, there was cutscenes that showed this, where Trenkov went and ended up fighting against KOS-MOS, and I believe KOS-MOS ended up injuring him pretty bad, or he ended up running from her or something like that. But yeah, he was there at that time when KOS-MOS went out of control, but that was by design. Here's another kind of explanation of why some of the stuff that happened in the imaginary world in Shion's mind actually took place in the real world, basically talking about KOS-MOS' repairs. Well, their reasoning here is the fact that the actions of one portion of the UMN, which I guess is how they initiated this, the deep memory or the collective unconscious, are equivalent to those of the real world according to one definition, where the difference is strictly subjective, brought about by the observer's recognition of it as such. So I don't really get that, but sure, why not? Why not? Through KOS-MOS awakened as though KOS-MOS awakened as Mary Magdalene as a result of Telos' defeat, Mary's original memories and characteristics have undergone a transformation. Kevin had mentioned this, leading to the creation of an entirely new personality, which is both Mary and not Mary, hence why she said that to Shion at some point. This is fundamentally analogous to Sakura's transformation into Momo, which I believe was a plotline that was completely dropped. Basically, they try to say that through the UMN, Sakura eventually kind of partially migrated into Momo, or that was part of Joachim's plan from the beginning, but it modified, and so Momo is not Sakura. She's a new entity, hence a new person. The plotline they did acknowledged in episode 2 between Yuli, Ziggy, and Momo. KOS-MOS falls into the eternal sleep and drifts like the passage of time through the emptiness of space. A blue light penetrates her battered and faded figure. Perhaps that light will be the cause of a new awakening. Of what? I have no idea. Shion Uzuki. Only a few people know that she has a congenital, unique sense that has allowed her to see into imaginary space since early childhood, which is impossible for most people, which is why she was able to hear more of the Song of Nephilim than anyone else. No one else could hear it save for Chaos, who, for obvious reasons, that's basically him, you know, and Junior can because he's a URTV, he's designed in that way. And I think Momo could sense it, but Shion could hear it, and that's not normally possible. The holographic glasses she wears were a present from Kevin during her time at Vector. They serve not to correct her vision, but to control this ability. So, thinking about this now, Kevin knew a long time ago, obviously, since he was there when she was a child, that she has this ability to talk to Udu. So limiting her ability to see into imaginary space would probably prevent her from communicating with Udu. So for a long time, she was protected from that, and so it never really became a big deal until, say, a year later, because after episode 1, episode 2 follows directly after and doesn't really last very long. And then after that, there's a 1-year gap, and then she starts experiencing all this Udu stuff, and she starts talking to Udu more. So Kevin was actually protecting her since way back when. As this sense of hers is not activated all the time, she has gotten used to it. She removes the glasses when they present an inconvenience to her daily life. She doesn't even wear them anymore. She really stopped wearing them at the end of episode 2, or end of episode 1, or start of episode 2, whenever it was, when Alan stepped on them. Her consciousness has existed since the time of Lost Jerusalem as the Maiden, when she enjoyed a close relationship with Mary Magdalene. The term Maiden of Mary is really just a misnomer. It makes less sense than if they had just said a friend or whatever, because basically Shion's purpose in the Lost Jerusalem era, or her consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, she existed at that point, not as Shion, but as a friend to Mary Magdalene. Now, it is suggested that she has some amount of power in her, because in specific parts of the database, or the Perfect Works, or the wiki, it is mentioned that Shion's past self, this maiden, was part of the ability to unlock Animus's power, and of course Animus needed her power to unlock Chaos's power of Anima. Okay, can be deduced from KOS-MOS' last words that Shion's former self died as a result of being caught up in some larger occurrence, and that KOS-MOS, or Mary, had been unable to protect her. Now, it is mentioned, I believe in the wiki, that Shion, as the maiden, died after Mary gave up her power of Animus to seal or to split off the power of Anima, Chaos's power, into the 12 Anima, or vessels of Anima. So after she did that, Mary has no power. And then part of the conflict at that time was the factions supporting Wilhelm. Yes, Wilhelm was around back then, though these never talked about. But at this point, Wilhelm is part of one factor that's kind of trying to manipulate people in order to be in favor of eternal recurrence, while the other ones are in favor of the Messiah. So, at that time, Shion or the maiden, dies trying to protect Mary or trying to do something in this conflict. Mary, losing all of her power, is unable to protect the maiden, Shion, and that was one of the images we saw in the cutscene that we saw during the Telos, or before the Telos boss fight. After discovering Alan's feelings for her on Mictum, Shion took the first step towards her independence. Shion, for whom Kevin's existence was so large that it had occluded Alan's feelings for her until then, might have felt that Alan, who lived in a world entirely opposite from her own, could better provide her heart a place of respite than Kevin, whose circumstances mirrored her own, which is why they kind of got along so well together for such a long time, and why their bond was so strong that Shion was content being used. A traveler headed to Lost Jerusalem, the end of a journey spanning thousands upon thousands of years, setting out from a new dawn to rebuild the world. The intersection of countless consciousness and what awaits them there. Damn, there's too much database here. That's all for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.